November 26th, 2022. Something is wrong with my husband. It's in the way he talks to me, as though we were strangers with nothing in common. It's in his glassy-eyed stare, as though his mind is someplace far away. Someplace I can't follow. Talk to him, my psychiatrist tells me, as if I hadn't tried that already. The excuses are always the same. When Brendan gets that dreamy expression on his face, it's because he's tired. But when I catch him creeping around the house in the middle of the night, it's because he can't sleep. We used to share everything with each other. Now, though, I'm lucky if I can get more than a sentence out of him. The more confrontational I get, the more he laughs, smiles, and shrugs it off. But I'm not the irrational one here. He's hiding something. I just can't figure out what. It's maddening. I'm sick of waking up and finding a cold, hollow space beside me. I'm sick of seeing that eerie glow beneath his home office door every night, after he thinks I'm asleep. I'm through with his excuses. I've got to write this down. Otherwise, I won't have the courage to do it. Tonight, I'm going to confront him. I'm going to push open that door without knocking and find out once and for all what's on the other side. November 29th, 2022. I made my husband angry last night. And at this point, I'm going to consider that progress. He finally showed real emotion, even if that emotion made me cover my face like I was expecting him to attack me. Or maybe I just didn't want to look at the crazy way his face rearranged itself, like barely melted wax. Going from animal rage to that creepy smile of his in 5 seconds flat. I'd half expected to catch him with his pants down, literally, but he'd just been standing there, all scratched up and covered with dirt. When I confronted him, he made the usual excuses. Nothing, really. I was just coming back to bed, and I lost it. I told him he'd been acting like a freak for weeks now, and demanded that he tell me what was going on. And then, for the first time since I married Brendan, I felt real fear. Fear for him? Fear of him? I'm not sure. He looked through me, like I was a child asking questions about the heat death of the universe. Like I was sticking my nose into something that I couldn't possibly comprehend. He shouldered past me and went back to bed without a word. My psychiatrist also told me that I should read what I write. When I do, though, I don't like how I sound. I come across as the bad guy here. Maybe Brendan is just planning some surprise romantic getaway, or buying my Christmas gifts early. But I doubt it. December 3rd, 2022. Is something wrong with my husband? Or is something wrong with me? I'm becoming obsessed with Brendan's obsession. It's affecting my sleep, my work, even my relationships with other people. My mother called yesterday, panicking because I hadn't answered her messages in over a week. But the truth is, I hadn't even noticed. My thoughts drift back to it constantly. What could Brendan be hiding? I told myself I'd never turn into one of those wives. The kind who snoops through their husband's phone or fishes his bank statements out of the paper shredder, searching for proof of infidelity. But that's exactly what I did this afternoon. And I didn't like what I found. Brendan had spent over half his salary last month on a jumble of letters and numbers. Or at least, that was how the purchases showed up. Disguised. Just looking at them gave me a chill. I didn't know Brendan was capable of being so careful. So methodical. This was a man who couldn't find 2 socks in the morning. And there he was creating a cover-up for... what? I figured I'd find the answer on his phone. But getting it away from him was easier said than done. The way he stares at it reminds me of the way I saw him staring at his blank computer screen that night. And as soon as I get close, he angles it away from me. Then he gets that look on his face. The monster look, I've started calling it. That expression goes from rage to confusion to a chilling Ted Bundy smile. God, I can already imagine how it'll go. I'll be laying by Brendan's side at night, my brain burning through all of the possibilities of what he might be up to. He'll lurch out of bed once he thinks I'm asleep. Only this time, he won't slink off to do whatever it is he does in his office at night. Instead, he'll wrap his hands around my neck. Those hands will feel cold and strong and totally unlike my husband's. But when he starts to squeeze, my eyes will pop open, and I'll be looking up at Brendan's grinning face. December 10th, 2022. I'm in uncharted territory now. I've officially gone from behavior that's slightly nosy to downright stalkerish. I took a few days off work. I told my boss I had a family emergency, but I didn't say anything to Brendan. I just followed him around for 3 entire days in a rented car like a cheap detective. As far as I can tell, being a private eye mostly involves overeating, fighting boredom, and peeing behind bushes in parking lots. In another life, maybe I would have been good at it. I didn't lose sight of Brendan even once. Then again, he didn't do anything strange either. Straight to work and back home again. On Tuesday, he went grocery shopping. Wednesday, he had his home improvement course at the library. Friday, he had his weekly meetup at a sports bar with friends from work. No mistresses, no blackmail, no bodies in the woods. Just a sleep-deprived wife in a rented Audi, staring through the windshield and questioning her sanity. December 13th, 2022. It seems like my luck has finally turned around. I got access to Brendan's phone yesterday. It slipped out of his pants while he was driving. Like a pickpocket, I leaned over to take a sip of my coffee, and brought his phone back with me when I set my cup back down. I used my back to keep it pressed against the passenger seat until a chance came to hide it in my purse. Mission accomplished. We were going Christmas shopping, and I took advantage of that fact to get away from Brendan and pay a little visit to a cell phone store in the mall, where Bay works. I met Bay in college years ago, and we stayed in touch. The guy never said anything about his background, but one thing quickly became clear to our whole class. The guy could find, fix, or hotwire anything. Want textbook PDFs? Bay had the downloads. Laptop not working? Bay knew what the problem was. Need a second chance on an online quiz? Bay could hack it. I could only hope that he'd remember me, and that he'd have the skills to uncover the tracks my husband was trying so hard to hide. Bay not only recognized me, he also shouted my name so loudly half the mall could hear it. By the time I entered the shop, he was already smiling and pulling up pictures from our college days, asking how I'd been. But something in my eyes stopped him mid-sentence. Do I really seem that crazy? Bay motioned me into his office, basically a closet with lots of wires, and asked me what was wrong. Without going into too much detail, I explained that I was worried about my husband and needed access to his phone. Just like that, the old Bay was back. No more questions about kids or puppies. Right down to business. I don't know how he did it, but less than 20 minutes later, he was handing over my husband's whole history on a separate memory card. He told me it was on the house, a gift for an old client. As I was walking out the door, though, he grabbed my arm. "Call me," Bay said. "You really look like shit." December 14th, 2022. Always nice to see old friends, isn't it? My husband had said, when we got back in the car that day at the mall. Coming from him, it sounded like a threat. He must have heard Bay call out my name, seen us go into that back room together. Did he also know that I'd taken his phone? I hope not. I had slipped it into the space between the driver's seat and the seatbelt when we got back into the car, making it seem like it had been there all along. But I have no way of knowing if I had aroused his suspicions. Today, I'm home alone at last, and I've been going through the data that Bay copied for me. What I found is weird, to say the least. Part of me wants to believe that this is all a sick joke, that the curtains will come up and Brendan and Bay and everyone else will point at me and laugh. Then, life will go back to normal. The first strange thing I found was in the group chat my husband has with the guys at work. It started with a link sent by a guy named Mark, a young guy with short brown hair and thick-rimmed glasses, if I remember him right from the last company dinner. I didn't click on the link, especially after seeing the barrage of messages that came after. "Whoa, not funny, dude. I almost opened that at my desk," replied Alan. "Damn, she's fine as hell," according to Ellie. "How'd you find this?" asked Javier. "Come on now, I'm a married man," my husband Brendan wrote in. Mark's response to them was unnerving, to say the least. Guys? I didn't send that link." "Yeah, whatever," Ellie wrote back. "Nice find. Anyone else dream about her last night?" Javier had typed at 5:30 the next morning. "Gross," was my husband's reply. Both Ellie and Mark had responded with a thumbs up to the original message. The weird fixation on the girl from the link only got worse as the day went on. Gone were their bored workplace discussions about whether the Death Star had insurance, or who was going to win the next UFC fight. It was suddenly all about her. Message after message of, "Her eyes, man. They're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Did you see the way that she... Has anyone else heard her talk? I hope she's online again tonight." Two things unnerved me about my husband's suddenly very active work group chat. The first was the way my husband had to keep asking them to stop discussing her and get back on task. It wasn't at all like my Brendan to be the responsible one in the room. So how bad must the others have been? According to the last messages of the day, bad enough that Brendan was afraid for their jobs. The second cue was less obvious, but no more unsettling. As much as my husband's workmates were raving about this girl, they couldn't seem to agree on what she looked like. And as I scrolled on, the weirdness only intensified. "I was up all night," Mark wrote. "I think we all were." 3 thumbs up. "But she put on a hell of a show, am I right?" "I'm starting to get seriously concerned for you guys' health, LOL, replied my husband. That LOL was troubling. My husband never used it unless he meant the opposite of laughing out loud. Brendan's crew had him worried, and for good reason. By the end of the shift, they were arguing about who this girl belonged to. "Don't try me," Ellie sounded enraged. "She's fucking mine." After that, he left the chat. "So, that was weird," my husband wrote to the remaining members. "No kidding. Especially since me and her are meant to be together forever," Javier replied. "This isn't funny." Brendan was furious as well. "We might have just lost a friend. And because of what? Some stupid webcam show?" "Call her stupid again and see what happens," Javier wrote. "Parking lot after work, pussy," Mark added. "If you're man enough. I'll send her your head on a fucking plate." Even though I was just reading Brendan's messages, I tensed up imagining him sitting there at his desk, one of his best friends missing and the other 2 staring daggers at him. Wondering whether or not these 2 guys who he would have trusted with his life were actually going to attack him. I checked the date on the chat. November 18th. Back before all this started, but hadn't Brendan come home with a bunch of cuts and bruises around that time? I couldn't remember the exact date, but I remember he'd said that he had fallen down in the parking lot. "I'll send you her head on a fucking plate," Mark had written. It was the end of their group chat. But Javier had sent my husband another set of rapid-fire messages later that night. It's worth noting that Javier is, or was, a recovering alcoholic, with 3 completed years in AA. While sipping Sprite at an office Christmas party, he told my husband and I that one of the only things he remembered from his blotto years was the way he'd give people stupid nicknames. "I'm warning you, Brenny boy," Javier wrote to my husband on the night of November 22nd. "Don't click that link. It'll ruin your life. It sure as fuck ruined mine. I can't think about anything but her anymore. Not unless I drink." "Where are you?" Brendan texted him back, even though it was after midnight. "Stop what you're doing and let's talk, okay? Are you about to take a drink?" "About to," Javier responded. "I'm 6 beers in. It's funny. If I wasn't, I don't even think I could talk to you about this. She's in my head, Brenny boy. Like one of those bugs that eats its host from the inside. Where are you? My husband insisted. But Javier never replied. There was, however, an audio that my husband sent to Mark the next day. Look, man, I know we've had our differences lately, but we need to talk about Javier. I haven't heard from him since last night. He's not at work, and I think he's hitting the bottle again. Come on, man, we've been pals since '06. Why won't you talk to me? That was as far as I got today. It was pure luck that I heard the sound of my husband's key turning in the front door lock, over the sound of his own voice in the stolen recording. I paused it fast enough that he didn't hear it. I think. December 15th, 2022. It was hard to act normal last night, especially considering what I just learned about my husband, his friend, and that weird link. It tempted me all night. I wanted to click on it myself, but I held back. I had to go back to work, but I spent my lunch break with my husband's duplicated SIM card, revisiting old conversations, including one I should have noticed right away, because it was a conversation with Bay. Brendan introduced himself as my husband, and said I'd given him the number. A total lie. He told Bay that he'd heard stories about what a master hacker he was, which might have been true. I tended to tell college stories when I'd had a few too many. He wanted to know if Bay could find the owner of a website, without opening the link himself. He wanted Bay to dox someone. Money, he said, was no object. A bank transfer was made. A day later, my old pal provided my husband with a girl's name and address. Just like back in college. No questions asked. Guilt. I suddenly understood why Bay had called me over so eagerly, why he'd been so strangely ready to help. When he'd given my husband that girl's information and never heard back, he must have realized he'd made a terrible mistake. He'd been trying to make it right. But did Brendan know he'd help me? There were no more texts, but there was an email from a throwaway account. Brendan, it's Ellie. I need your help, brother. You were right. It was like my brain was in a fog. All it took was one look at her website, and I was giving up my money, my passwords, anything she asked for. I never would have snapped out of it. Except now Mark's gone too. You know how I always pick him up on the way to work? Today his house was unlocked and empty. He's gone to her. I know it. Brendan, if I tell you what I really think, you'll call me crazy, but she wants to drain more than just our bank accounts. Javier's disappeared. Mark too. And who knows how many others she's drained. We have to find a way to stop her. A way to stop her without looking at her. If you see her, brother, even for a second, she gets inside your head. I'll be at the bar this afternoon. Please, let's meet. We've got to stop this. My husband's response to Ellie's email was just as chilling, because it was a shopping list. A shopping list for things like handheld mirrors, black canvas bags, silver chains, a shovel, and a wooden stake. I shuddered. That must have been the day I'd followed him. I thought he was meeting his 3 best friends for drinks. But in reality, he was only meeting one. To plan an insane kidnapping. I had no way of knowing what else they discussed. But whatever it was, I had a feeling that it didn't bode well for Lily Prota, 11 Herringwood Ave. City and state redacted. Still, when I reverse searched the name and address Bay had sent, I found something strange. There didn't seem to be any evidence that a physical person with that name had ever existed. December 16th, 2022. I'm still reeling from everything that's happened in the last few days. It started when Brendan caught me. He must have suspected something, creeping around through the back door the way he did. And I was so engrossed in what I was doing that I didn't see his shadow falling over me until it was too late. My husband has never been the type to fly off the handle or lose his cool when he gets angry. It was one of the things I loved about him. But when I felt his hands grab my shoulders and slam me against the wall, I knew that man was gone forever. His face, just inches from mine, was like a plastic mask. "You have no idea," he whispered. "No idea at all." His eyes blurry with rage and fear. This was a man whose sanity was on its final threads, and unraveling fast. "You have to let me go." I forced my voice to remain calm. "I have to go back to work. I'm on my lunch break. They're waiting for me." Somehow, those magically familiar words, work, lunch break, made Brendan loosen his vice grip on my shoulders. It was enough. I slipped past him, crying, but I didn't run to my car. I went to Brendan's office instead. Locking the door behind me, I tapped the floor with my foot in search of what I knew I'd find. A trap door, hidden beneath the carpet. How had I not noticed it before? The way he'd come in here but make no sound, seeming to disappear. He hadn't been in this room. He'd been below it. I barely registered Brendan's panic pounding on the door. The way he kept yelling, "Stop. You don't know what you're doing. For the love of God, stop." Full of foreboding, I peeled back the carpet. A square of flooring had been cut out, and beneath it, a hastily dug grave. Lily Prota's. The lid of the cheap coffin in front of me was barely covered by a thin layer of dirt. I brushed it off and tore it open, hoping against hope that they hadn't killed her yet. The girl inside the coffin was beautiful beyond words, but she wasn't breathing. Ellie and my husband had bound her hands and wrists with silver chains, covered her head with a black bag, and hammered a wooden stake into her chest. I brought a hand to my mouth. They'd murdered this poor girl. I couldn't help but jump a little when she spoke, her voice wispy and weak beneath the black cloth. "Please, help me. Take the stake out, and the mask. I can't breathe." "We should wait for a doctor." I had already called 911. "And my husband. You have to do it," she moaned. "I'll die if you don't. I can feel it." "Stop." Brendan rammed his shoulder into the door until it shook on its hinges. I had to make a decision. I looked at the girl buried in the shallow grave beneath my house. There were goosebumps, cuts, and bruises on her brown skin. She was trembling, crying, and scared. She needed my help. I grabbed the stake and twisted it free. They hadn't managed to hammer it through her ribcage, but it must have put pressure on her lungs. Just before Brendan burst through the door, I tore away the hateful canvas hood and looked into her eyes. December 17th, 2022. When the police responded to my 911 call, I told them it was a misdial. They asked if it was alright if they took a look around. And of course, I let them. After all, the square of carpet in the office had been replaced, and Lily was beneath it with Brendan, feeding. She must have been so hungry these past weeks. The moment I saw her face, I knew she wasn't a monster to be imprisoned. She was a goddess to be worshipped. That's why I pulled Brendan's legs out from beneath him and helped Lily to drag him into the hole he dug. For her. He'll never have her now. She's mine and I'm hers. All I have, all I am, is hers. I know we'll be so happy together. Become a channel member today for early access, bonus videos, and special emojis only available to members. Check out the description below or click the join button for more info. If you'd like another way to help support the channel, please consider joining my Patreon page at patreon.com/JordanGroupHorror. As a patron, you'll get access to bonus videos and content. You'll be credited at the end of every video going forward. And if you decide to stay for 3 months, I'll name a character after you, which will be featured in a Hollow's End story. Links to join the Patreon are in the description. Thanks everyone for listening. Please like, subscribe, and comment to help the channel continue to grow. And see you again next time at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hope you have a great night.